There's always that question. What happens when a long-standing cold case is finally solved, but the answers are so completely bewildering that they totally subvert our expectations? Well, welcome to today's Explainer, where we're going to be looking at 3 incredibly complex missing persons cases that eventually came to a close, but absolutely not in the way anyone anticipated. Because as you'll see, when the passage of time finally forces the truth into the light, the reality is often way darker than any fiction.
Okay, let's dive into this first case because it really feels like something ripped straight out of a Hollywood thriller. We're setting the stage in the vibrant, really close-knit community of the 1990s Harlem drag ball scene. It's this incredible world of feathers, sequins, chosen families, and just fierce loyalty. But right beneath the glamorous surface of one of its most respected figures lay a secret that would remain buried for literally decades.
And this brings us to Dorian Corey. Dorian was a veteran drag performer, a renowned dressmaker who actually graduated from the Parsons School of Design, and just a beloved mentor to younger performers in what she called the House of Corey. She even starred in the famous 1990 documentary, Paris is Burning. In that film, Dorian delivered this haunting thought about leaving a mark on the world. Tragically, Dorian passed away from AIDS complications in August of 1993. Following her death, her close friend Lois Taylor was sorting through Dorian's extensive costume collection in her Harlem apartment. And what Lois found folded up and abandoned on the floor of a closet? Well, it would give Dorian's quote a chilling, foreshadowing new meaning.
So Lois discovered this green and plaid garment bag. It was so heavy that her 135-pound frame couldn't even lift it. Intrigued, she grabbed some scissors and began to cut it open. But the second a foul-smelling puff of air escaped, she immediately called the police. When investigators got there, they peeled back these layers of faux leather and plastic. They even found vintage pull tabs from 1960s beer cans tucked inside. And when they finally cut it all away, they found a mummified corpse entirely covered in baking soda, clearly to mask the smell. Based on the decomposition, investigators determined this body had been shoved into the recesses of Dorian's closet for 15 to 20 years.
The scene was grim. The body was curled up in a fetal position. The skin was this splotchy purple and yellow, and it was wearing only the tattered remains of blue and white boxer shorts. Oh, and there was a bullet hole right in the head. It seemed completely impossible to identify someone in this state, but miraculously, the layers of plastic and faux leather had perfectly preserved the body's fingerprints. And get this, those fingerprints belonged to Robert Bobby Worley. He was a man with an extensive criminal record who had basically vanished into thin air in the late 1960s, right after complaining to his brother about a fight with someone named Dorian.
So, how does a vanished ex-convict end up mummified in a drag queen's closet? Now, what's really interesting about the investigation is that 2 entirely conflicting theories emerged. The first is the home invasion theory. Some people speculated that Bobby broke in to rob Dorian. A struggle ensued, and she killed him in self-defense. There were even unverified rumors floating around about a note attached to the body claiming exactly this. But the physical evidence leans way more heavily toward the second theory. The crime of passion. Remember, Bobby was found wearing only boxer shorts and shoved into a bag, which strongly suggests he wasn't fully clothed when he died. This led investigators to believe they were actually in a tumultuous relationship that ended with a fatal gunshot.
A full quarter of a century passed between Bobby vanishing in 1968 and the discovery of the mummy in 1993. And that massive gap in time is exactly what allowed Dorian to keep this secret totally buried. I mean, think about it. She lived with a mummified corpse in her apartment, moving it around undetected until her passing finally broke the silence. But as we're going to see in our next case, sometimes a secret isn't just kept by one person, but shared between 2 betrayers.
So let's turn to the tragic disappearance of Jerry Michael Williams, who went by Mike. Mike was a wildly successful property appraiser down in Florida, making around $200,000 a year. He was married to his wife Denise and by all accounts living a pretty idyllic life. But on December 16, 2000, which devastatingly just happened to be his 6th wedding anniversary, Mike woke up early to go duck hunting on Lake Seminole. Now, this was a reservoir known for its treacherous, stump-filled waters. He told Denise he'd be back by midday, but he never returned.
When search and rescue finally found Mike's abandoned boat and shotgun, the initially accepted theory was just a tragic accident. Investigators assumed Mike hit a submerged stump, fell into the water, and drowned. And when his body never surfaced, they actually concluded he had been eaten by the lake's alligators. That basically became the accepted reality, and Denise eventually had him legally declared dead.
But Mike's mother, Cheryl, she fiercely refused to give up. She pointed out some vital, totally logical evidence. Mike's recovered hunting license had 0 alligator teeth marks on it. Plus, alligators rarely, if ever, hunt in the freezing cold winter months of December.
Cheryl campaigned for years to keep this case open. Meanwhile, in 2005, Mike's widow Denise seemingly moved on, and she married Mike's best friend and insurance agent, Brian Winchester. But flash forward to 2016, and their marriage completely fell apart. After they divorced, this incredibly chaotic and shocking incident occurred. Brian snuck into Denise's car and actually kidnapped her at gunpoint. Denise miraculously managed to calm him down and escape to the police, completely subverting everything we thought we knew about Mike's accidental death. And this brilliantly illustrates the real reason behind the kidnapping. It turns out this attack was driven by the sheer paranoia of a guilty conscience. When questioned, a friend of Brian's revealed Brian's true motive for holding his ex-wife at gunpoint. Brian was absolutely terrified that, because of their bitter divorce, Denise was going to expose their dark secret. He was terrified she'd go to the police and start talking about, quote, this guy who died 10 or 12 or 15 years ago. The truth that finally spilled out was horrifying. Brian Winchester, acting as Mike's insurance agent, had written a staggering $1 million life insurance policy on Mike shortly before his death. And even worse, Brian and Denise had been carrying on a secret affair since 1997. We're talking stealing kisses at concerts while their completely oblivious spouses were standing right outside. Once he was granted immunity to confess, Brian testified to exactly what happened on that fateful hunting trip. He pushed his best friend Mike out of the boat, and when Mike didn't drown, Brian shot him in the face with his shotgun. He later buried his body and claimed he did it at Denise's insistence.
It took nearly 2 decades for this massive web of betrayal to finally unravel. From Mike vanishing in 2000 to the brazen marriage of his killers in 2005, all the way to the eventual discovery of Mike's remains in 2017, all thanks to Brian's confession. Today, Brian is serving 20 years for kidnapping, but due to that immunity deal, he'll actually walk free for the murder. Denise, however, was sentenced to 30 years for conspiracy. A mother's intuition proved right all along, which perfectly sets the stage for our final, equally frustrating missing persons case.
In October of 2005, the small, tight-knit community of Ocilla, Georgia, was just rocked by the disappearance of Tara Faye Grinstead. Tara was a former beauty queen who actually used her pageant winnings to fund her true passion, which was education. She was a beloved 30-year-old high school history teacher, completely and genuinely dedicated to mentoring her students. But after attending a weekend barbecue, Tara just never showed up to teach her Monday morning class. The clues left behind at her house were completely baffling. Her car was just sitting in the driveway, her cell phone was locked inside the house, but her keys and purse were nowhere to be found. Inside, an alarm clock was thrown under her bed and a bedside lamp was smashed. Outside on the stoop, investigators found a latex swab containing unidentified male DNA. And for 12 agonizing years, investigators just hit dead end after dead end. The community was even tormented by this cruel serial killer hoax from a guy calling himself the Catch Me Killer, who falsely claimed to have murdered Tara for fame. The case went entirely, frustratingly, ice cold.
So, the crucial point is, who could possibly do this to someone so universally loved? Well, in 2017, a whisper finally broke the silence. A woman named Brooke Sheridan went to the police after months of pestering her boyfriend to reveal a dark secret he'd been keeping. That boyfriend was a man named Bo Dukes. And the devastating twist, Bo Dukes, alongside his roommate Ryan Duke, were both former students at the very high school where Tara taught. Bo had literally been in Tara's class.
Bo confessed to his girlfriend that Ryan Duke had drunkenly admitted to burglarizing Tara's home for drug money. Step by step, the details of this brutal and senseless crime were finally laid out. Ryan broke in, was startled by Tara waking up, and strangled her on her own bed. He then actually enlisted Bo's help. Together, they used Bo's truck to move her body to a pecan orchard owned by Bo's own family. And there, in just a prolonged and incredibly elaborate cover-up, they burned their beloved teacher's remains in a fire pit for 2 entire days until she was completely unrecognizable, before burying the bone fragments.
Tara vanished in 2005 and had to be declared dead in 2010 with absolutely no physical leads mapping to a suspect. It wasn't until 2017 that a single confession, brought on by a guilty conscience, brought the whole thing crashing down. This sequence of events perfectly encapsulates the overarching theme of today's explainer.
A case can sit completely dormant, basically haunting an entire community, until the weight of the secret just becomes too heavy for someone to bear.
Let's see how all this builds together, because when we look at these three stories side by side, a much larger picture emerges. Whether it's a drag queen living with a mummy in her closet for 20 years, a wife marrying her husband's murderer and hiding it for 17 years, or two former students burning their teacher's body and staying perfectly quiet for 12 years, all three of these cases prove one undeniable fact: time eventually forces all hidden truths right up to the surface. You can bury a body in an orchard, sink it under a lake, or hide it behind sequin dresses, but time is always the ultimate detective. Which leaves us with this final, chilling thought to consider. We all like to think we know the people in our lives, right? But if a best friend can push you off a boat for $1 million, and if your own students can break into your house in the dead of night, how well do we really know the people around us? These solved mysteries finally give us the answers to the who and the how, but the deep, unpredictable darkness of human nature remains the biggest mystery of all. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and remember, keep questioning what you think you know.